Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. I've actually touched on this story a bit already in a previous video, but I felt it was important to revisit for Black History Month because it is a very important and albeit very dark stain on Black history in Canada. And the story in question is the Fred Christie case. Now, Fred Christie was born in Jamaica in 1902. And as a citizen of the British Empire, he immigrated to Canada in 1919. When he immigrated to Canada, he first moved, I think, somewhere else, but then moved to Montreal. And here in Montreal was where he found a good job working as a chauffeur. And it's also where he developed a deep passion and love for hockey, particularly probably either the Montreal Canadiens or the other team that was in Montreal at the time that a lot of Anglophones loved, the Montreal Maroons. It's not really known, at least I don't think it's known, which team he supported, but we know he loved hockey. Which brings us to his case. So, at the York Tavern, which was a tavern that was inside the Montreal Forum, which is the big arena where the various hockey teams played, in the, hockey season, and then in the off season, it was home to different exposition games, boxing matches, etc. And he decided to go here with two friends of his, one of whom was another black friend, and the other who was a French Canadian. And they go into the York Tavern, and he asks, he puts like 50 cents on the counter and says, 3 beers, please. And he is refused service because he's black. They tell him this, and he's kind of shocked because he's gotten service here before. The context here is that he was refused service because a lot of people were fearing potential race riots between a mixed race boxing match between a black boxer and a white boxer. And so because of this, they didn't want to risk, any confrontation with other patrons and start a fight. So they refused him service because he was black and they didn't want no trouble. And of course he gets upset. He being Fred Christie, brings a policeman over, hey, look, like they're refusing to serve me. This is ridiculous. Policeman doesn't do anything. And so the long road to the Fred Christie case begins. He tries to bring a legal battle to court and sues the York Tavern for damages. The courts ultimately say no. He tries to take it to the Supreme Court because one of the justices in the lower court had a dissenting opinion, so he hoped that maybe the Supreme Court would hear it and side with him. But instead what happens is he loses the case, and the result is that the Supreme Court of Canada in 1939, when this case was happening, they enshrined racism as a principle, saying that businesses, as free businesses, were free to refuse service on whatever grounds they saw fit. Whether you're black, Chinese, Jewish, indigenous, they legalized racism. Now, the silver lining was that after this, it spurred a lot of actual progressive activism in the 40s, especially after World War II and the horrors that happened that made people realize, maybe we should revisit this, because we saw where refusing people based on service and things led in now the formerly Nazi Germany. So that really helped advance things, but it didn't really help Fred Christie and his case. Because of losing his case and how dejected he was, Fred Christie ended up moving across the border to Vermont, where he ended up living out the rest of his days while still loving hockey. This is not, ancient history. This man, if he were, still alive, would be as old as some of our grandparents. This idea of racism is not in the distant past. Lots of people have a familial connection to it. And many people who are black, indigenous, Chinese, any part of a racialized minority, or if you're part of a religious or LGBT minority, you feel this to this day. The legacy of the Fred Christie case, beyond its black stain of legalizing racism from, the auspices of the highest court in the land, was that it then spurred a reevaluation in the wake of World War II. And it got more activists more involved. And so I think if there's any aspect of that legacy to celebrate, is that even when the people in power and the highest court in the land says no, that doesn't mean you should stop fighting. It means you should fight harder. And so the fact that more of us don't know about Fred Christie and take this lesson to heart is definitely what's bothering me today.